How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Last week I did a video ranking the top hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! Post Alliance Insight, and it was a very free-flowing video and you guys absolutely loved it. So today I want to do the exact same thing but look at board breakers only. So this is a very unscripted video. We're just going to talk off the cuff about these board breakers and rank them into 6 different categories. So if you're excited for it, then make sure to smash the like button and of course subscribe to the channel as well, and comment your favorite board breakers down in the comments below. But with that being said, here are the best board breakers post Alliance Insight. So starting off with our first card, it's obviously going to be alphabetical order, and I should just say this for those who didn't see the previous video, we have 6 categories. Most main decks, some main decks, most side decks, some side decks, niche, and just don't. Basically, I'm going to be putting these cards into the tier list that is most appropriate for where they would belong in your strategy. For example, a card that would be seeing a lot of play in main decks and that most main decks should be playing this card will be in the most main decks tier. Just like a card that may be absolutely incredible and a better card than something in the most main decks tier will be in the some side decks tier because it's more of a side deck staple. And finally, niche is going to be for cards that are really situational and don't come up that often, and just don't are going to be because there's cards that are significantly better at doing what this card here does. For example, the first one being Alpha Master of Beasts. This card is really bad. We all thought it was going to be great when it was released, and it just wasn't the case. The free 3000 attack body is awesome, but it's really only good going second. It's level 8 body, but the fact that its effect to bounce back to the hand isn't a quick effect, that's where the problem starts to come up, and that's why it falls in the just don't tier. After that is a Book of Eclipse. This card is actually not bad. It's not a terrible option at all. I would actually put into some main decks here. I have some buddies that are playing it in the main deck right now and they really like it. If you look at the format right now overall, there's Malice that's going to be a really big problem, but there's also going to be the Mitsurugi deck, there's going to be Ryzel, there's going to be Mermail, there's going to be Memento, there's going to be Fire King, and so on. Blue Eyes as well. There's a ton of really incredible decks, and the only deck that really doesn't care at all about Book of Eclipse is pretty much exactly Malice when they can set up first. If you can Book of Eclipse your opponent's board as they're trying to set up and they have 2 Malice main deck monsters on the field and you can set them face down, that's really good because they don't have the ability to then just banish them with an effect like something like March Hare or something like Abyss Jolt to be able to extend even further. And when they're face down, they can't use the link material. The weakness for this card is it's being able to be hit by Ash Blossom, so just keep that in mind. We also have Book of Moon, and Book of Moon is not as good right now. I put it in niche tier because right now targeting effects in general just aren't very good. Cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Failure really aren't as strong as they once were because there are so many ways for you to dodge targeting effects, and Book of Moon doesn't even offer the best form of targeting effect. It's going to be just target to set face down, while Infinite Impermanence would target to negate. And that's being reduced in play, so Book of Moon would make sense as going to be lower on the tier list, definitely going to be a niche card. Next up is Change of Heart. Solid card overall, but again, it targets. It's really not going to be that strong. A lot of the time, if you're playing against pretty much any deck, you Change of Heart to target something. They can use something like a Detonator to pop itself and then bring itself back with Eclipse Twins. They can use something like Mitsurugi Prayers to tribute off the card and bring it back. They can force you to discard with the effect of Murukumo as well. Additionally, they can always use the Mouse Traps to banish their guy temporarily and bring it right back. There's so much that you can do. So I feel like playing Change of Heart just really isn't going to be as impactful as you really want it to be. Moving on is going to be Cosmic Cyclone. Look, back row removal right now is really important, and Cosmic Cyclone was really good when we were playing formats that had a lot of floodgates in them, and it's just not really the case right now. I still think if you want to play it, you can. It's a really niche card, but it doesn't come up as often as anyone would expect, so for that reason, I'll put it in the niche tier. Dark Hole is up next, and a really interesting card because in formats where your opponent is giving you a monster that is causing you problems, like something like Nightmare Corruptor Ibli, this card is really solid. However, it's really only going to be good in decks that exclusively want to go second, like Tenpai Dragon. And the fact that it's not once per turn is great, but it's not really seeing any play in anyone's side deck, or main deck rather, if it's not exclusively Tenpai Dragon. And because that's the only deck that's really seeing play for this card, I'm actually just going to put it into the niche tier for that reason. Next up is Dark Ruler No More. This is a great card. I think most people should be considering this card in their side deck. That doesn't mean it's going to end up in most side decks because there's a lot of really powerful cards that could kind of fill this role, but as a great going second tool, being able to stop a wide range of cards is obviously fantastic. Just keep in mind right now, one of the biggest features of all decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be that the decks are able to rebuild their board very effectively during your turn. For example, a Malice end board may not look very assuming, but as soon as they bring back a copy of Whitebinder, they're going to be able to then banish their entire board, or their entire graveyard really, and bring them back out so they can have a ton of powerful resources. A deck like Malice, or Murakumo, oh my god, I'm blanking so hard. A deck like Mitsurugi is kind of the same boat, where it just tributes off their cards, brings them back out after the fact, and being able to blow up the board is really good. There are a ton of great options for that. So if you do get hit with a Dark Ruler No More, it's not the end of the world, but it can interrupt some decks, and for that reason I think it should be in consideration. And it also forces out a lot of interruptions at the wrong time. So again, most side decks is my consideration. Look, honestly, you can go in some side decks, but I'll say most side decks for the time being. Next up is Pankratops. Just don't. Right now, Pankratops doesn't really offer any significant advantage. It's not big enough to really be worth your while. It's not going to be as consistent enough because it's really only good going second. Additionally, the pop effect, while it is nice, it was a lot better in formats where we had to just summon out a big guy, beat over something, and then blow itself up to be able to destroy a back row or an opposing monster. That's just really not the case right now, so I'll put it into the just don't tier. Enemy controller is not actually that bad. I'll put it into some side decks because certain decks really don't want to have their monsters taken away, just like Change of Heart. But the reason why Change of Heart isn't good is because it's used exclusively as a reaction card versus Enemy Controller can be used proactively, where your opponent's trying to set up and you can just take their extender, or you can take their Link 2 monster so they can extend into a Malice Link 3. You can take their copy of their Habakiri so they can't tribute it off and then be able to get extra searches and so on. There's a lot of really unique ways you can be able to use Enemy Controller, and I think for that reason, some decks are actually going to be considering to play it. After that is Evenly Matched. I like Evenly a lot. There are some decks that really want to play it. I was considering playing it for quite a few different strategies, but in the end, I decided not to. I also think it belongs in some side decks. I want to put it into some main decks, just like Dark Ruler No More, but it's also kind of like just on the border there, where it could go to most side decks or some side decks. But again, the fact that pretty much every deck this format is able to play around it in some capacity is great. Now, if it resolves, then that's obviously incredible. But just think about it. Against the Mitsurugi, they force you to discard a card, then they tribute off the card that would be summoned, that would be getting banished. For example, the Murakumo, they can bring it back. Rizal Detonator can pop itself, which is great. There's also obviously going to be the Allied Kotok or Ignister. There's going to be all these powerful cards in Mermail, which is not even going to matter because they just hand loop you basically. Memento doesn't set up negation, but it's able to really deal with cards very effectively because it can just recycle back the resource and get guys back onto the field with Memento Fusion. And on top of that, the Fiendsmith cards are going to negate this, so it really doesn't matter too much. But again, if it resolves, it's great. That being said, we have Forbidden Chalice, and this is going to go in our Just Don't tier. This is basically just a worse version of Infinite Impermanence that is technically more flexible. If I had the choice between playing Infinite Impermanence and Forbidden Chalice, it would 100% be Infinite Impermanence, even though I can't use it when I have cards on the field proactively from the hand. That being said, the attack modification is nice because you can use it in the damage step, but either way, it's just not as good as you really need it to be. Then is going to be Forbidden Droplet. This is another card I think can go into some main decks. It's a phenomenal card. I think pretty much anyone who can play it, whose deck can take advantage of the downside of Forbidden Droplet being sending cards from hand or field to graveyard, should be considering this card because it is super flexible. It's amazing going first and going second. It's also great because it can be used in the damage step. It helps you OTK. It's just a super flexible and powerful card. I have nothing but good things to say about it. The issue is not every deck can take advantage of it. For example, if you're playing Crystron, that is a phenomenal deck to use Forbidden Droplet. On the other hand, if you're playing Rizal, I kind of wouldn't recommend it because you really want to have a critical number of your Rizal monsters, your Mitsurugi cards in your hand, because you can just keep extending past all your opponent's interruption. If you're sending them to the graveyard to use Forbidden Droplet, then you're obviously not getting that extra advantage. So that's why it belongs in some main decks and not most main decks. Then is going to be Kaijus. I have Gamma Seal here as the token Kaiju right now. I really wouldn't play them. I don't think Kaijus are that strong. There are certain situations where Kaijus can come up and be really nice, where you can just blow out an opponent, but they're really not going to be that consistent. And even now, one of the top decks in the format, Mitsurugi, doesn't care if they're tributed, because if they are, they just come back and search for a card. So just don't play Kaijus. Then is the newest board breaker, being Gordian Slicer. This card is really, really strong, and I honestly believe the card can be good in the right deck. The problem is, the right deck is like exactly Tenpai Dragon right now. I'm going to say it's a very niche card because the card itself, you have to not really care too much about an extra deck, which is number one. And Tenpai Dragon, while they do care, they don't care to the point where they have to have all 15 slots. I mean, they play Pot of Prosperity. And Gordian Slicer is a really powerful piece of removal that also doesn't banish the resources from the extra deck until the effect actually resolves, which is really nice. I think it's a phenomenal card. It's a great board breaker. It just doesn't come up right now, and the fact that you need to be able to play an extra deck that really doesn't care too much, or you don't need an extra deck in your deck, I would say you kind of have to put this card into the niche tier for the time being. Then is Harpy's Feather Duster. This should go into most side decks. It is phenomenal. It is probably the best side deck worthy card we've seen on this tier list right now. It's a great option. It's a free card. Pop your opponent's back row, really good for no reason. It's searchable with Thrust. It's a fantastic card. You have to be playing it, in my opinion, right now, because every single deck is not just setting up a lot of really powerful monsters, but they can rebuild partly because they have all their insane back row as well, and it acts as really unique forms of disruption, so play Harpy's Feather Duster. Herald of the Abyss is also pretty bad. I mean, right now, the reason why Herald was seeing play in the first place was because of a deck like Pearly, and, well, Pearly isn't in the meta anymore, so we shouldn't be playing Herald of the Abyss. Just don't touch it. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is essentially going to be a worse version of Dark Hole. Sure, it gives you a body, but it also gives your opponent a body, and at the end of the day, you have to play bricks in your deck in the form of Kaijus, which we already established weren't that good. Just don't play this card. It really doesn't make any sense right now. Then is Kashtira Fenrir. This is a card that is great as an engine piece. It's great as a way to get extra bodies onto the field, and as a card itself, it's very strong, but it's a better card going first than going second. That's because if your opponent does an action, you can then interrupt them mid-combo onto a crucial piece of their combo. So for that reason, Fenrir would see a lot more play. I'm kind of teetering on the board between most main decks and some main decks. In reality, most decks aren't playing Fenrir, so I'm going to put it into the some main decks because when you are playing it, it's in the main deck. You're playing it alongside your Kashtira Unicorns, your Births, maybe even Pressured Planet Raidsoth. At the end of the day, Fenrir is a phenomenal card, and it's great at breaking boards, but it's even better at supplementing them with extra pieces of interruption while also getting you extra bodies that you might need to be able to extend further into your combo. So as a board breaker, some main decks, as a card overall, definitely a top tier card still to this day. Next up, Kurikara Div Incarnate. Very niche, but if we think about it, what decks right now have mandatory effects that happen early in the turn where it makes sense for you to then use Kurikara, but at the same time, you're also going to want to get rid of them from their side of the field because of the lingering effects they had. Kurikara was so good specifically because a card like Kashtira Arise Heart was in the format, and it made it so that when the effect happened in the standby phase to be able to summon out a guy or banish cards or whatever, then it would trigger, and then you would use the Kurikara to be able to tribute over the Arise Heart so that the Macrocosmos effect would no longer be applying. There's nothing really that's doing that right now. So I'm kind of tempted to put it into just don't. So that's where it's going to go. Lava Golem is up next. If you don't need your normal summon, sure, you can play Lava Golem. There are going to be some decks that really hate dealing with the double tribute. Other decks, like Mitsurugi specifically, are totally fine with it. In reality though, it's pretty much a niche card, and really only if you don't need your normal summon, and if you're playing specifically a deck that is not happy if their cards get tributed. So that's why Lava Golem is over here. Lightning Storm also belongs in most side decks. It's essentially just Harpy's Feather Duster, but on top of that, it can deal with opposing attack position monsters. There's a restriction for this though, but the reason why people are playing Lightning Storm isn't because it's such an amazing card, it's because Duster is such an amazing card and you can only play one of those. If Duster was at 3 copies, I'm pretty confident people would play 3 Duster rather than 1 Duster and 2 Lightning Storm. But hey, that's just me. After that, Metal Tronus. Now look, Metal Tronus was seeing play in most main decks before when Rizal was pretty much the top deck, and this was before Alliance Insights, before Mitsurugi Rizal became a thing, before the ban list hit, and now for some reason it's really slid off. It's surprising. I think part of the reason why is because Charmies have become such a huge factor in the metagame that you don't really need to have board breakers because you're forcing your opponent to create a half board, and you don't need to have it as targeted of a board breaker against those types of decks. In reality, a board breaker like Book of Eclipse or Forbidden Droplet will likely just be good enough against a half board. That being said, it's still a phenomenal card, and I think if you want to play it, you definitely could. It's going to be great against the Rizal Detonator. It's going to be fantastic against the White Binder because they're all one-ofs. It's also going to be really good against any of the Fiendsmith cards as well. So it's a great consideration. However, not every deck is playing it. And part of that is because extra deck space is really limited. So I'm going to put it into some side decks for the time being. Next up, Raigeki, also just like Dark Hole, very niche. really only want to play it when you're going second, and the only good going second deck right now is pretty much Tenpai Dragon, so we're going to put it into the same tier as Dark Hole. Just keep in mind these cards aren't equal. There are some times where Raigeki is better, sometimes where it's worse, and sometimes where Dark Hole is significantly better, and it really comes down to what the format is shaping up to be. If you're being given monsters, Dark Hole will be better. If you're not, then Raigeki will usually be the better card. Next up is a new card that we're talking about, being Sales Ban. I'm going to put this card into most side decks here. Specifically, most side decks, assuming you are not playing a deck like Raizo Mitsurugi. This card is phenomenal against that deck. Essentially, the way it works is you declare a card name, and then your opponent can't activate the effects of cards you can't activate the effects of cards with that name for the rest of the turn, and you can't activate them for the rest of the duel. So if you're not playing Raizo Mitsurugi and you call Raizo Detonator, they can go ahead and use the Detonator to pop itself and then bring itself back with Eclipse Twins, but they can't then use the effect of Detonator anymore. If you call it on Murukumo, that's also a great advantage, because if you can stop them from recycling itself back, stop the Raigeki effect, that can be really good. And for that reason, it's really powerful against that deck. It's also quite good against a deck like Malice, for example, because if you call the White Binder before they have the opportunity to banish it, then they lose one of their best ways to just recur their resources back, because they have no way to just mass banish things. So in general, I think a card like Sales Ban is actually quite strong and should see some consideration in a lot of side decks. Snatch Steal is up next. We talked about targeting effects are really bad right now. Targeting to take control in general is quite bad with the form of Change of Heart. The reason why Econ is so high is because it's proactive, it's a quick play spell. This card here, Snatch Steal, it's not a quick play spell, and it loses to just traditional forms of disruption, just like a quick effect pop like Detonator, so I wouldn't consider it as a great option. Spellbound, also really not considering right now. Most end boards are not ending on a copy of IP Masquerena, and even then, it's really only good to use Spellbound on your opponent's turn when they're trying to build their board up, or it's really good to use when your opponent specifically has a card like IP Masquerena on the field. And right now, IP is not being part of most traditional end boards, so for that reason, I'll put it into the just don't tier. Spell card Monster Reborn is quite good. I actually would consider siding it. I even would consider putting it into some main decks, because the card itself is really good at being able to disrupt the graveyard, but it's also really good at just stopping your opponent from extending their plays. It doesn't banish cards, so it doesn't trigger the Malice monsters. It takes control of them, which is really good, and you get ways to link climb as well. There's a lot of really awesome ways to use this card here, and I think there's going to be a time where this card becomes a staple in the side decks, but not for the time being. Then we have Super Polymerization. This goes into some main decks. There are some decks that when they play Super Poly, it is absolutely devastating. If you get to a Super Poly on a Raizo board before you can get to an Xyz monster, or if they can summon out an Xyz monster and then you can just Super Poly away the board, it makes things really difficult for them to keep extending further. So for that reason, I think Super Poly is phenomenal. It's also great because pretty much the entire Malice deck is made up of Dark Cyberus monsters, so if you take two of them, link them away, or fusion them away, then you're going to be able to create a Garura, which will be able to get you extra draws. There'll be a rank 6 play potentially for you. It's a dark monster as well, so if you make Chaos Angel, that's also a good option. There's a lot of really good advantages to playing Super Polymerization. But the reason why it's not in most main decks is because right now, the format doesn't have a lot of decks that have a ton of space in their main deck for Super Poly targets, and that's why it stays in the some main decks tier. After that, Triple Tactics Talents, right away, this is the first card that goes into the most main decks tier, and I'll be honest, this is the only card that'll be playable in most main decks. It's a phenomenal card right now. If you look at the way the format is shaping up, there's a ton of hand traps, a ton of charmies, so you can be able to play it good when you're going first. But also, if your opponent is trying to just stop you from playing the game and you just go, okay, talents to take a card, it doesn't target, you can take something they may really desperately need, you can look at their hand for a hand trap that you just can't play through, and so on. There are so many amazing uses for Triple Tactics Talents, and I think it is definitely the best of the board breakers on this list because of its flexibility going first and when going second, and it definitely deserves to be limited to one copy. After that, we have the Triple Tactics Thrust, the brother to Triple Tactics Talents, and this is more of a side deck card. I would definitely consider it to be a playable in most side decks card, mostly because you're using it to search out for other board breakers. By playing 2-3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust, you can search for these unsearchable 1-ups that are just absolute blowouts against most strategies. Like you can search for the Lightning Storm, the Duster, a Dark Hole, and Evenly Mashed, and so on. There are so many great choices, and I think if you're playing those cards, you might as well side in at least one copy of Triple Tactics Thrust to be able to support the searching or the finding of those cards. Twin Twister, really not that strong. It goes into the niche tier, really a a bad card right now. I just wouldn't consider it a great one because, again, the cost for it is very high. It's discarding a card is not good right now. The destruction is also not very good. You're rather than playing cards like the Harpy's Feather Duster and the Lightning Storm for back row removal. Twin Twister is better when you're trying to go first. Ultimate Slayer, I would consider this a some side deck card still. You can still send cards to the graveyard to really trigger powerful effects. You can send an Entis to the grave to be able to pop a second card. You can send a Meteorologic Aggregator, which lets you deal with pretty much an entire pure Rizal end board by shuffling back the Detonator and negating the cross. You have access to be able to send link monsters like the Bucephalus to be able to get a Malice monster back into the extra deck, which is great. And then continuing from there, you can just keep getting extra advantage by sending more cards to the graveyard with the Bucephalus. Again, great card. We'll consider playing it. There's a lot of really targeted pieces for Rizal in this, but overall, because the deck, it's kind of more from pure Rizal to a Mitsurugi Rizal, then these cards aren't going to be as strong right now. Vesper Girsu, I would not play Vesper Girsu. I think the card will have its time. The issue with this card, and what will always be the issue with this card, is your opponent chooses what effect they want to resolve. And the second you give your opponent a choice, they're going to make it the choice that's best for them and worst for you. So for that reason, I'll put it in the just don't tier. Xyz Encore is niche. You can technically use it as a way to just deal with an entire Mitsurugi end board or entire Rizal end board, for example, but it's not that strong overall because, again, there's so many other options available that are just better and more flexible against pretty much every deck. If almost every deck in the format was an Xyz-based strategy, then Xyz Encore would be great, but it's just not the case right now, so for that reason, I'll put it into the niche tier. And finally is Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode. Just don't. Lava Golem was higher because you're basically setting up a board that you're tributing over 2 monsters, and that's great and everything, and Winged Dragon of Ra is the same card, but for 3 monsters. However, the issue with Winged Dragon of Ra is there's very rarely going to be an end board that is as wide that you have to get rid of 3 monsters. Sometimes your opponent can just play around it naturally by ending on 2 cards, and that's it. And if that's all they do, then your card is pretty much useless. So I'll put into the just don't tier. Sure, I guess you can put into niche if you want to, but I'm going to stick with just don't for the time being. And that's it. That's my tier list for the top board breakers in Yu-Gi-Oh! Post-Alliance Insights. We are right before the new Battles of Legend Monstrous Mayhem, I think is what it's called. And we got all the new chibi artwork and the Orcus cards, and I've got a ton of really interesting videos planned for that, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a like on the video as well. If you guys leave a like on the video and we hit, let's call it 200 likes on the video, I'll bring you a tier list for the best budget decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Post Monstrous Mayhem. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.